Hi folks, Chris Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com. Here we're coming to you with our special podcast, Abby's Pet Health Podcast. And welcome to the show. We're glad everyone could tune in for this thing. We'll be talking today with Dr. Sara Boston. And Sara is the author of the book, Get Lucky? Lucky Dog. I'm thinking of the movie Get Lucky, I think. And Sara is a veterinary surgical oncologist, which means cancer surgery doctor. And she has an interesting journey. Her book, Lucky Dog, talks about how being a veterinarian saved her life when she discovered that not only does she work on pets with cancer, she came down with cancer herself. So this is going to be an interesting journey in the discovery and chatter about cancer. So welcome to the show, Dr. Sara Boston.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really nice to meet you.
Yes, thanks for coming on. Pets are an important part of my life and everything else. So you went through an interesting journey because you see firsthand the what would you say, the challenges, the dangers, the horrors of cancer, being a surgeon yourself.
Yeah, so I actually treat a lot of thyroid cancer in dogs. It's a relatively common disease that dogs come down with, and it's treated primarily with surgery. Sometimes we add in chemotherapy or radiation depending on the case, but surgery is usually the mainstay of treatment. And so I've felt a lot of dogs that have thyroid carcinoma. I've felt their necks, and I've also done a lot of thyroid carcinoma surgery. And so I found a mass in my own neck just getting ready for bed. I'm a really big advocate for everybody, men and women, feeling their neck every day and maybe putting I always put wrinkle cream on my neck, but doing something touching your neck every day so that you really can pick up on things that are different.
This is mostly what I do when I'm,
You can do that too, whatever works for you, but
what did you do today?
Feel someone else's neck. But yeah, I think it's important because you know what your own neck feels like. And so if you have a slow change happening or a quick change, for me, it was a kind of a quick change. I suddenly felt a mass there that I hadn't felt before. And, I'm lucky because that's part of there's a lot of reasons why I'm lucky about the reason for the title, but I touch things for a living, and I knew it was different. And I know a lot about thyroid carcinoma in dogs anyway. And so I kind of knew right away that it was something different, that it hadn't been there for a long time, and it probably was associated with my thyroid. Wow.
Now, do most dogs and or humans survive thyroid cancer if it's caught early enough, I guess?
Yeah. So one of the things that a lot of thyroid cancer survivors don't really like is the term good cancer. So a lot of people will say that thyroid cancer is good cancer, and I think it's a well-intentioned phrase. It will rub thyroid cancer survivors the wrong way for a couple reasons. One is that it's not all good. So there's a percentage of thyroid cancers in humans that people can have metastasis and death from. And so if you kind of get thrown into that camp and you're going through facing something pretty difficult, that makes it harder because it's a bit invalidating. And even if you are, I'm in the camp that had papillary thyroid carcinoma and would be in the camp of having a very good prognosis for long-term survival, so in the 95 to 98 percentile, which is great. There's still things that you go through. I think anyone who has cancer, or even people who thought they had cancer for a while, that it's challenging. And so I think that's why the community doesn't like good cancer. But overall, I look at other, I have friends who are going through cancer treatment right now. And I do feel lucky. I feel like it was caught early. I had really good treatment, and overall, I'm doing great, and my prognosis is excellent.
Well, that's awesome. So you're a cancer survivor, and it's interesting. I don't know why. I guess I lived in a world of denial. But when I got my first dogs, I thought, well, dogs are, they live in nature. They don't get cancer. I never really thought about it. I was just like an idiot. In fact, I remember when I got my first husky and I came home and I was like, I should read about these dogs. And then I read about them and I was like, hold on, they only live like 10 to 12 years on average. What did I just do? I thought about like a kid that would just keep on living after I died. And I just don't know. I was just being stupid, but
Yeah, it's funny. I think even when we know that, even as a veterinarian, and we know the average lifespan of our pet, it's still, you know, and I talk about this in the book too, it comes as a shock. You know, all of my clients are just in shock, even though pets that get cancer are usually older pets, and even though you can tell yourself a million times through your pet's life that you know that their lifespan is finite and that we're probably going to lose them before we go. It's still shocking, and it's, you know, it's still extremely difficult. And I say that, you know, I'll always have a dog, because you know, I can't not have a dog, but it's like a programmed heartbreak. You know, my dog's turning 5 soon, and I can make myself sad thinking about it, projecting into the future of what's going to happen. And so, yeah, but while he's here, you know, I mean, he makes my life wonderful. So I don't think I could ever not have a dog.
It's amazing. And so in your book, you basically talk about the hysterical and thought-provoking journey. I'm reading this from amzn.to through the human healthcare system, which is a nightmare. I think Forbes interviewed me about that once. And stories of dogs, how you got treated. You know, I guess you don't have a lot of the sort of paperwork and the giant, massive human healthcare industrial complex that we have in human healthcare. And you're probably used to where, with being a veterinarian, you could easily work on dogs and get them healed up.
Yeah, well, I actually was in Canada for some of my treatment. I'm Canadian, and I'm living in Florida right now. So my book actually really compares all 3 healthcare systems. So the Canadian system, the American system, and then the veterinary system, which is its own system. And it's people pay for service, and it's usually faster service because there's not long waits. I do have a bit of a waiting list for people that want to get specialist care, but in general, it's a lot faster. Things move faster than in people. I think veterinarians spend a bit more time with their clients, just as a general rule. I felt like that as a patient, that I spent more time with my clients and patients than my doctors were spending with me explaining things. The Canadian system, I haven't gone through it all. People read my book and think that I'm bashing the Canadian system, because I had a very long wait. So from finding a fast-growing mass in my neck to my first surgery was 2.5 months. And during that time, the mass was growing. My husband's also a veterinarian. I like ultrasound in my own neck with his ultrasound machine, because I wasn't waiting to have an ultrasound. I was like, I'm getting out of here right now. And so the wait was very frustrating. It was very, very frustrating. It's actually what spurred me to write about it, because I needed something to do. It was kind of cathartic. Being down here now and seeing the issues with healthcare here, and I'm by no means an expert on it, but I think on the balance, I prefer the Canadian system because people are taken care of. And there's a lot of challenges even for people that have good insurance, you know, kind of what you said, like jumping through the hoops, and there's just a lot of challenges there. But I actually think all of the systems could learn from each other, because there's good things about each system.
Yeah, I can hear a little bit in your boot.
Yeah, I haven't lost my accent.
That's how I can always tell Canadians. The boot gives them away. So it's an interesting book. You can get it on amazon.com. So some of the things I want to talk to you about was how can people look, I guess, for cancer or lymphoma cancer or thyroid cancer in their dog? How can they keep an eye out for stuff like that?
Sure, it's a great question. I think a lot of it is health maintenance. You know, you'll see lists of signs of cancer in your pet, but really cancer can happen anywhere. So, you know, I think watching their appetite, sudden change in their breath, it can be that they have really bad dental disease, which is usually what people think, but it also can be a tumor in the mouth. And so, you know, getting their mouth checked out by a veterinarian is probably a good idea. Any changes in their eating or sleeping habits, behavior changes. So, you know, if a dog was always like friendly and happy around kids and suddenly didn't want to be around kids, or suddenly was a bit grumpy when it's not in their nature, that could be because of pain. It could be because of a brain tumor. You know, it could be, so, you know, if you suddenly see your pet acting very differently than what they normally did, you should probably talk to your veterinarian about that. And then there's kind of also just the basic kind of lumps and bumps. So lymphoma, typically dogs will have enlarged either one or multiple lymph nodes that are enlarged. Now, most owners don't know that's a lymph node, but they'll feel something that they didn't feel before. Thyroid carcinoma is actually pretty tricky in a dog, especially if you have a big, thick-necked dog. You have to be pretty astute to find that. But some owners will find it, or their groomer will say, hey, there's something not right here. And any kind of a mass that comes up. Now, most masses are benign, so I don't want everyone hearing this to panic if they find a mass on their dog or they've been watching it. But if there's a mass that's growing, it's becoming fixed, it's bothering your dog, or even if it's not, the best thing you can do is get your veterinarian to do what's called a fine needle aspirate, where they just put a needle into it and take a sample of the cells that are there. Like I said, most of the masses, skin masses in dogs, 80% of them are going to be benign, but then and you don't have to worry about it. You know that that's a benign mass, or if it's in that 20% of masses that are actually something to worry about, you can act on it quickly. So, just watching them, I don't usually recommend that, because until you know what it is, how do you know? If it's a slow-growing sarcoma, you may not see much change even in a year, but you'd be better off to treat it sooner than later.
Yeah, most definitely get it sooner than later. The with cancers, what's the best way to deal with? And you kind of know this firsthand. What's the best way to deal with when you or your dog is diagnosed with cancer? What do you recommend the best approach is when you're first, you walk into the office and that bomb hits you?
Yeah, I think if you have a friend who can come with you just to help, listen, because whether it's a medical appointment for a person or for a dog, the person who's taking in the medical information, this is kind of known, will only retain about 10% of that information. So I can talk to you for an hour and you can listen really hard, but ultimately when you go home and try to explain that to someone else, you may not retain everything because you're very stressed. There's a lot of new things that you're trying to understand and learn, and if you don't have a medical background. So I do have a lot of clients that just bring their best friend with them, or just to sit and take notes, or ask the questions that maybe the person in the moment doesn't think to ask. So I think that can be really helpful. I think the other thing is just to look at options. So there are veterinary surgical oncologists, there are veterinary medical oncologists, and veterinary radiation oncologists. So asking for referral, maybe, depending on what your dog's condition is, saying, can I go talk to a specialist? Talking to a specialist doesn't mean you're going to treat. It just means you're going to talk to someone who has really focused all of their career on that area, and they can give you all the options, and then you can take those options and then kind of decide, is that right for you and your pet?
Cool. When you first get the news, it hits you like a ton of bricks. Sometimes you get a lot of resources. Sometimes you don't. Definitely talking to specialists. So getting technically a second opinion, either from another vet or a specialist, is a really important thing.
Yeah, and the other thing I just mentioned, because the internet, is probably true for a lot of things, but it's your friend, but it's kind of your enemy too, because there's actually some things on the internet that just aren't true. That'll say, you can cure cancer with raw food, and you can cure cancer with these other things, and I can see why people are drawn to that, because wouldn't that be wonderful if we could do that?
True.
But I also think that we would know that, if that was the cure, more people would know. It wouldn't be like a secret on the internet. But my heart really hurts when people do that, and they come in and they say, well, what about this? And I think for people who are interested in, holistic therapies or integrated medicine, a lot of specialists will work with them, but I think it's important, work with a veterinarian who's good at that. Work with a veterinarian who knows about that. If that's what you like to do, and if that's how you like to treat your own health, then that's fantastic. But work with a veterinarian who has a vet degree and has studied veterinary medicine, and then has decided to go into that as their specialist area. And then maybe they'll work with a specialist as well at the same time. So it doesn't have to be one or the other,
Last year I went through a huge change where I changed my diet, and I didn't become a militant vegan, but I became a vegan to lose weight. And I cut out all the pop and the different things that I was doing, and I totally changed my eating habits. And then the same thing happened with my dog Abby, where she was diagnosed with cancer. We went to a raw diet. We didn't expect it to beat the cancer, of course, but to give her body fuel to fight. And so we went through a journey where we really learned, both of us, how poisonous our food was. There's different movies about this sort of thing, what's in the food, what you're feeding dogs. And I really found out that it was very important. some of the food that I was eating was just so toxic and so awful, and it was poisoning my body. And I literally lost 70 pounds within 2 to 3 months.
Wow.
The weight just dropped off me. That's how horrible the food was that I was eating. Food, let's put that in quotation marks.
Yeah.
Because I've realized now there's a real difference between food and like nutrition. So I lost like 70 pounds in 3 months, with no exercise at all. So that's how I learned the power of food. Abby went from 3 days of a diagnosis of having anal sac cancer and I basically was told, come back in 3 days, we're going to put her down, to where putting her on a raw food diet, we extended her life 14 months, and the doctors were just amazed. We didn't think it would beat cancer by putting her on a raw food diet. We just knew that hopefully it would give her body the ability to fight, and whether or not that worked or not, I'm not a scientist, but we really started getting into, what you eat and some of the stuff. And I guess there has been an increase of dog cancer or pet cancer rates with some of this food, or do you find that there's an attribution there?
Yeah, I mean, the whole diet issue is really controversial. So I can sort of tell you my take on it. I'm glad that Abby lived that long, and I'm really sorry that you just lost her to anal sac cancer. It may have been the diet, it may not have been the diet. I think being on a good balanced nutrition is important for anyone, regardless of what any dog or person, regardless of what they're going through. There are some concerns in the veterinary community about the raw food diets, because we have seen actually people getting exposed to salmonella and E. coli through the raw food, because they're handling like around the dog's mouth, or they're touching the food. And there was actually just a pretty controversial case. There was a woman who had children in foster care, and she fed her dogs raw food, and the foster kids were getting sick, and they had to do like investigate her home and everything. And so it kind of shone a light on that issue that people don't really think about, the effects, kind of how linked human and animal health is. I think most of the high quality veterinary approved diets are going to be good quality foods. There's been some things in the media that there's been mistakes made. Vitamin D has not been balanced and that kind of thing. And I think that when things like that happen, everyone says, well, see, the food is awful. I think the food is generally really good. It's really high quality. Can you cook for your dog? Absolutely. If most people don't have time to cook for their own dog, but you can. I would just say if people really want to do that, you've got to make sure you're getting balanced nutrition. So you can do that by purchasing it, that someone's done that for you, or you can do it working with a veterinarian. But some people will forget calcium, or they'll forget magnesium. You know what I mean? Like, just because they don't know exactly what the dog needs, and the dog will end up with a worse nutritional situation than if they just would have been on regular dog food. So it kind of comes down to what people want to do. I think as long as you're making sure that they're on a balanced diet, then it's fine. But people feed dogs, you're talking about feeding them kind of crappier food. Like, we want to give them a donut. We want to take them to the drive-through and they get like their little donut bowl, or they get I feel like I'm like a killjoy, but the puppuccino, whenever when people talk about going to Starbucks and they get their dog like it's a cup of cream. I mean, I'm sure they love it. It's probably not the best thing to give to your pet, but it's kind of that, like, of course they love it. Like, my dog would love that. He never gets that. He doesn't get people food or any treats. But I just think we just have to think about that. If you do that once a month, is it a big deal? Probably not. And if your dog loves it and it makes you laugh and makes you happy and it makes them happy, it's fine. But every day, I probably would say, no, don't do that,
Yeah, you want to make it a regular thing. I mean, at one point, I was considering filtering my dog's water so they could get filtered water that was clean, that was cleaner. I have a really nice system that has it's got like 12 filters in it, does all this solar and I forget the type of stuff that it does, reverse osmosis, where it really super cleans my water. And I thought, I had to start giving that to them because I want them to live longer. And then I realized that this is an animal that eats its own poop sometimes.
Sometimes.
I was kind of like, I don't, maybe filtered water isn't going to really cut it at extending their life.
But I mean, the interesting point that you make is like we we share the same environment, you know, sometimes the same food, sometimes the same water, the same home environment. I mean, most of our dogs are in our bedrooms, possibly our beds, you know, so that we're in the exact same environment. And so when we talk about the increased rate of cancer in dogs and why are we seeing that, it's a little bit of an indication of a couple of things. One is what's happening with us. The other thing is it's a positive thing. We treat our pets more, you know, they have better veterinary care, better preventative care, so they are living longer. And it's like any population that lives longer, so the human population also, we're living longer in North America. We live long enough to develop cancer, which is awful, but it's wonderful that our pets can live this long, you know, and that they're not dying of parvovirus. You know, if they get hit by a car, we can usually fix a broken leg and treat them and get them back on their feet and living to be an older pet. So it's a terrible problem that we're seeing more cancer, but probably some of it is coming from a good reason.
You know, that makes sense. That's really, I'm glad you said that. That really makes sense. My dogs lived to almost 15 and 16 years respectively, the two that I've lost. And people are always like, that's just amazing. You know, they live that long. And yeah. I always tried to feed them well. I didn't buy any of those. I don't know if there's anything to this, so I'll go on your advice. But I always stayed away from the cheap dog food at the store brands, and went to and you know, tried to buy the more expensive ones always, and the ones that seem to be the most kind of natural and not have a lot of the wheat and grain and stuff like that. There's a lot of dialogue, like you say, on the internet about how good that is for animals. But I always tried to feed them well and take care of them. And yeah, they got better health care than I did. I think they've seen the doctor more than I ever have. So yeah, we take care of them. But yeah, so that does make sense though. They're living longer. We're living longer. Of course, we have more cancer. It's when Abby was going through her last stages, it just became more and more obvious that the older she was getting, I mean, at one point it became apparent that either arthritis was going to get her first or the cancer was going to get her first. And the arthritis seemed to be moving fairly fast. And it was just she was 16.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was just like, something's going to get you. You're just living long enough.
Yeah. Well, I mean, those are old huskies, you know, I mean, it doesn't take the sting away, but you've done really well to have your pets live that long. Yeah. You're doing something right.
Yeah, given for huskies, it's a pretty good time. Yeah. So one of the first things, the biggest thing that we had trouble with was walking away from the vet and just feeling like we didn't have a lot of resources. And the one thing I've counseled people is when they're really upset because you'll see them blow up online. Oh my God, we just got back from the office and the vet says this. And I really encourage people to go read about their stuff, really kind of look in the eye. You know, the first thing I did after the first day when the bomb dropped with Abby's anal sac cancer was, after, you know, the initial shock wore off, I got online and I started reading about anal sac cancer and everything I could. And I said, let's you know, take this head on, look the dragon in the mouth, and try and understand what we're dealing with, what our options are, and really being an advocate. And that was one of the questions I had for you. I mean, what's the best way that someone, once they find out they have cancer, or maybe their dog or pet has cancer, what's the best way to be an advocate for their health, to really lobby, to make sure they understand what they're doing, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, so I mean, the internet can be good and bad. I think hopefully your family veterinarian, if you do have a diagnosis of cancer, hopefully they're going to tell you that there's specialists and ask you if you would like to see one. And some people do and some people don't. But I think it's a good resource to have, to say, well, you know, if someone says, well, you should put your pet down because they have cancer, that is one option. And sometimes it is the only option. Sometimes, you know, that is literally the only option for that pet. But I would say most of the time that's not true. Most of the time there's going to be other things that can be done, either for palliation, which just means to help the pet to feel better. It's usually a short-term thing, but it's just to help with the symptoms, essentially, help them be less painful. You know, if they're having trouble defecating because of a large anal sac mass, you could give them stool softeners to help them with that. So there's sort of some relatively short-term palliative things that can be done just to help them in the short term feel better. And then there's other things that we would call curative intent, which is where we're talking about surgery and chemotherapy and radiation. And that's kind of where I come in, but that's not for everybody. Not everybody is up for that, either for financial reasons. They can't travel. They don't want their pet to go through a big cancer surgery. It doesn't feel right for them. So but I think it's good to know what the options are, and sort of be able to kind of like say, okay, well, what is going to be right for my family, and you have to put I always think of it like a mathematical equation. I think because I'm a science geek, but you have to put in all those different factors and then kind of at the end come up with an answer. So it's not like I can say, well, every dog with this cancer has to be treated this way, because I don't know all those factors. I know the disease very well, but I don't know everything else that kind of goes into someone making that decision for their family member.
Yeah.
So I'm just there to help give that information, and then, if they want me to do surgery, I'm always a surgeon, so I like doing surgery. So I'm always happy to do that, but I don't think everyone that comes to me is necessarily going to feel like they have to do surgery, or and a lot of my clients, I kind of like them to go away for a week and go think
about the big picture, huh?
I've kind of really changed my approach from when I did general surgery. Bring a dog in and say, oh, you have a torn cruciate, we can do surgery tomorrow, which, because it's still a big decision, but I think it's different with cancer surgery. And so for my patients now, I've kind of shifted to, I like them to come in and get their staging test done and get their biopsy done, so people understand, does my dog have cancer that's spread or not? What is the surgery involved? What's the diagnosis exactly? And then I like them to have that information. And then, I mean this nicely, I like them to go away. I like them to go, for a week and think about what they want to do, and then call me if they want to do surgery. I don't want anyone to rush into that decision. I think you need to process it. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of time. It's a big commitment to do cancer surgery or cancer treatment in your pet. And so that's kind of how I have things set up now. I'd like get all the information done, like the staging part of done. And then once we have that information, have people just take a little bit of time. It can be a day, it can be a night, but it could also be a week. Usually it's a big emergency that has to be decided right now. So.
Yeah, that was the being able to know your options, being able to sit down and go, let's understand this, was really empowering for me after the first day, in realizing, at first it was just a huge shock. And then I realized the doctor was referring me to a specialist, and I was like, okay, so there's hope, possibly. The biggest challenge we had was Abby had stopped eating, and Abby had stopped eating for actually a while, or she was just grazing. And so she'd lost a lot of weight. And I've always been with my Huskies. Huskies are really good this way, where they just kind of control their own stuff. Yeah. I'd always just put their food out for them in a big bowl, and every few weeks I have to refill it. So I kind of was unable. I wasn't monitoring how much they were eating. There's two of them. Yeah. So I never paid much attention to it. And I thought, sure, weight loss had been kind of, I should have looked at sooner, but I thought her weight loss was kind of just old age. Her arthritis was starting to act up. And I'm like, and I think the vet at one point had looked at her and said, she's just losing muscle mass in her back legs. It's part of arthritis, that sort of thing. And so we didn't know that she'd stopped eating, basically. And then when we went to the doctor's like, yeah, she's stopped eating. She's done. She referred me to a specialist, but the biggest challenge with Abby was they would have to cut out a hole, and they weren't sure that it would heal, and it would sever the nerve that regulated her being able to, not be in a diaper. She'd have to wear a diaper after that, and of course go to chemo. And so that was the big thing. And I think their anticipation was if she went through chemo, she might live 3 months at her age. There wasn't much to do. But being an advocate for your dog and really, I think, getting over that initial moment of the hit of it, and then focusing on learning everything you possibly can about your options, I think is a huge important thing. Because that's what we did, and that's how we changed the dynamic of going from 3 days to 14 months. And really amazing some people on the doctors. I mean, the doctors, every time we go in, would just be like, she's still here. She's still here. And so, it's just, I talk to so many people, and that's just the hardest thing for them to get over, is that initial shock, the initial loss. Like, you're like, they're gonna die, and it's like, you have some options, you have some different things. Let's gather some information. Let's talk to some people. Let's read about stuff. Talk to veterinarians like yourself, specialists, and sometimes there's possibilities out there that you find that make a difference that you wouldn't think otherwise. I mean, like you say, I think you said thyroid cancer has survival of 80-90% or 80-90% of it is benign.
So thyroid cancer in dogs, it's actually, most thyroid masses in dogs are malignant, but they generally have an excellent prognosis. So with surgery alone, those dogs live, we call it a median. You can think of it like an average of about 3 years. Now, there's going to be outliers. There's going to be dogs that are cured with surgery, and there's going to be dogs that you can't even do surgery because their cancer is so aggressive that it's grown around everything in their neck. And that's the same with people. There's going to be always kind of a spectrum. But in general, thyroid cancer in dogs typically has a very good prognosis with surgery, and then we sort of say plus or minus with chemotherapy, depending on, sometimes we don't know until we've removed the mass, and we'll send it away for the pathologist to tell us essentially what is it exactly and how bad does it look. And if it looks very aggressive, those are the ones we may consider adding chemotherapy in.
Wow.
But in general, if you think about these dogs, they tend to be around 10. I mean, most of my patients are 10.
Wow. That was the other thing I was going to ask you, what the average age is that you're seeing that in.
I would say, most of these cancers are happening in middle-aged to older pets. This is kind of a geeky medical joke, but if I'm like trying to talk in rounds about a dog and I can't remember their exact age, I always say 10, and I'm usually right because they're usually 10. I mean, that's kind of the age. And so when we look at our survival data, they live for 3 years, but I mean, a lot of dogs without thyroid cancer would not, they would live for 3 more years or 2 more years, and so what it means is that, if you have a 3-year survival in a cancer that happens in an older pet, a lot of those animals are being cured of their cancer and they're dying of something else, because we know that, kind of like what you alluded to, there's something is going to happen. I had a dog who lived to be 15, and honestly, it was just kind of like she wore out. Like, I mean, I'm a medical person. That doesn't sound very medical, but it was everything. Everything kind of happened at the same time for her, and it wasn't one thing, but her quality of life really declined, and we sort of had to make that difficult decision for her. That, well, she's not really having a very good time anymore with her, everything that's going on with her. But and I think that happens with older patients too. I'm really lucky at University of Florida. I will go across the road to the human hospital, and I can listen to the human specialists talk about their medical cases, and the way they would treat a 50-year-old and the way they would treat a 90-year-old are different. And I think we need to think about that too, with our pets. And we always say old age is not a disease, and it's not. It's not a reason not to treat cancer. However, you got to look at the whole patient, everything going on with them. Are their kidneys functioning okay? Do they have really horrible arthritis that they're having a really hard time getting around? Is there anything we can do for that? Can we help them, do some physiotherapy or something to help them, maybe just that aspect of their quality of life be better? So I do think you kind of have to take that, and I mean holistic, and I guess in a slightly different sense, but a holistic approach to your patients to make sure we're treating everything that's going on.
Yeah. Some aspects of that I was thinking about. So would you say getting more cancer screenings then about the 10 year on mark, it would be a good thing for dog owners or pet owners just to make?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I have a wonderful client down here, and she has means to do this, and she does this every 6 months. She does cancer screenings on her pet. I think doing regular health checks, so when your pets get older, at least every 12 months, but possibly every 6 to 12 months, getting at least a physical exam, but sometimes getting also some blood work done is a really good idea if you can do it. Then the next question is, do you add imaging in? Sometimes you find things. And so the classical imaging we would do for a cancer screen would be x-rays of the chest and an abdominal ultrasound. That can be very effective at picking up things. The only thing I will say is when you do that in older pets, like we do abdominal ultrasounds in older dogs all the time, and we'll find these like splenic nodules and liver nodules that may be something or maybe benign. And so then it sort of becomes a challenge for us. But I probably much more so for the client. What do I do about that? And are you going to lose sleep because I told you your dog has a 1 centimeter splenic nodule and I don't know if it should come out or not? But, you know, I think in general, being sort of on the aggressive side with looking for, you know, is my pet healthy, having at least a physical exam. Part of the physical exam would be looking for skin masses, doing a rectal examination, feel those anal sacs and say, is there anything going on there? Now, you'd have to be, I guess, you know, catch it at the right time for that to be effective. So then how often do you do it? You know, I think more than every 6 months is definitely overkill. But
the last thing I ever thought about doing was looking at my dog's butthole. And the one thing I've always hated about huskies is they always have their tail up. And so whenever I'm walking to them, I used to make these jokes. I'm looking at a couple assholes right now because it'd be my 2 dogs, and you know, the huskies got their tail up, and it's like, I really don't want this. Does not want to be my scenery right now. But yeah, I've learned that I had no idea until she got the cancer that there was this thing called, you know, an anal sac on a dog, and you got to monitor it sometimes and express it if it gets infected or I had no idea what that was until we hit the wall. So yeah, this is why I'm doing this podcast, is to, you know, let people know that you need to look for these things. It did get to a point with Abby where we had to, because she would get different lumps and she'd get skin growths, little tabs that would grow and things of that nature. The older she would get, the worse it would get. She got a few different things we had to cut off her, that the vets cut off her. The vets just were like, it's pointless to test for cancer. We'll just cut this off. Or she had like a growth in her lip. But yeah, what do you think about pet insurance? That was the other thing I was going to ask you, because I will always struggle with the dilemma of pet insurance.
Oh, for me, it's not a dilemma. I'm a really big advocate for people getting insurance for their pets.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, my pets are insured. I have a dog and a cat, and I have them insured. Which I just had a client joking around with me. He said, "Oh, because you know how much you cost. That's why you have insurance." And it's true. I mean, it's very expensive. Veterinary care. I wish it wasn't, because I know it's a challenging issue for us as a profession. It's very challenging for our clients. I'm amazed constantly by what my clients do for their pets. It's amazing. But it's a lot of money, and you know, it's a lot to ask of someone to spend $5,000 or $10,000 on their pet, and especially if something that was completely unexpected. So yeah, I have insurance for my pets, and the one I have will cover, like, you've got to read those carefully, because that's the other thing that I find upsetting. I have a client who's paid health insurance their pet's whole life, and then they come in and it's like not very good insurance, to be honest, you know. So I think working with your veterinarian, ask them which one is good. Things that cover per condition, you know, like $2,000 per condition and then you're done. It's honestly, that's not very, I mean, it's better than not having it, but it's really, you'd be better off putting money in a savings account if you have that type of insurance, because for cancer, for pets, honestly, if you're going to do everything, if you're going to do chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, we're talking in the $5,000 to $10,000 or even more range. So having only $2,000 for a condition and then not paying any more for that condition, really hard for those clients, because they feel like they didn't even have insurance, and why did they do that? So you really want to look at the plans that are covering, like the one I have is like 90% for that, and there's no caps. So you don't want it to be per condition, and you don't want it to have a cap per condition. And the other thing, which I always tell people, is don't get insurance that covers vaccines or things that you know you have to do anyway. That's why you have insurance, right? Yeah. Like tooth cleanings and those kind of, I mean, those are things that they're just part of pet ownership, and it's expensive to own a pet. I mean, you're a long-time pet owner, and you know that, right? The food is expensive. Taking to the vet is expensive. If you have to groom them, it's expensive. But you know those expenses are coming. You can budget for it. It's when something happens, like they get injured or they get cancer, you had no idea that was coming, and now you've got $5,000 or $10,000 in visa bills. That's what you need insurance for. So, but yeah, I'm a big fan of insurance, because, like you said, it's stressful enough knowing that your pet has cancer and trying to figure out what you're going to do. If on top of it you have to figure out how you can pay for it, or you can't do what you think you want to do because you can't afford it, I mean, that's a terrible situation. And then the other thing that happens a lot in my office is, like, one person wants to do it and the other doesn't, and it's for financial reasons. So That's when I like. We need a like a couples counselor in here too. But you know, if you can kind of have that not be an issue. It's challenging, you know, it's challenging. And sometimes it's not financial. Sometimes one person wants to treat cancer and the other doesn't feel it's right. And that can be challenging. I also actually recommend that when couples get a pet, they have, first of all, insurance, but they also have one person is the decider, if that makes sense. You know, they have the final word on medical decisions for the pet, and it's decided before there's an issue because it can create a lot of problems, I can tell you.
Yeah, I mean, I've been single all my life, and sometimes I've had to look at a relationship and go, if I have to choose between you and my dog, I think we know where that's going.
Yeah.
They were here first, and they're pretty loyal. Yeah, and I know, and I love dogs, and so but the funny part is I don't like barky little dogs. And I remember having a girlfriend who had barky little dogs. And I love dogs, but I can't stand barky dogs. And I train my dogs not to bark. But I was like, I would probably, if you moved in here with that dog, I would probably, I'd probably go insane. I wouldn't hurt the dog, but definitely thought about it.
They have a role. They have a role.
And I do have friends in relationships that their wives or their husbands are very keen on the dog, and the other partner is kind of like not really as keen as they are about the dog. But no, that's really great that you say that about pet insurance.
Yeah, I don't understand that in relationships, because I understand it before if someone's not had a pet live in their home, but I'm like, but once you're living with them, like, don't you just love them? Like, don't you feel so lucky that you have a dog? Like, I don't know. But anyway, so yeah, I guess I'm too much of an animal person, and I'm just surrounded by colleagues and clients that are all animal people. So sometimes I'm like, really?
Yeah, even my family, there's a couple members of my family that are really disconnected. We've had dogs when we were children, but they're just really disconnected from the emotional connection. Like they can understand the connection with humans, but dogs are a subspecies that is disconnected from, I don't know, the caring world. But yeah, it's great that you say that about pet insurance. Yeah, that was one of the bombs that when it dropped, I looked around my world and I went, okay, well, how much of this gets to go? All my property, how much am I willing to go and spend to save Abby? Yeah, it's tough, because then you realize that sometimes the amount of care may be factored into the amount of resources you have, and can you live with yourself if you didn't spend the money to save your dog? And it's a real dilemma when you have to cross that thing. I wish there was more better resources for people to deal with everything from hospice care. I mean, that was my thing. I was lucky enough to work from home, so I was able to provide hospice care 24/7 to Abby. But it took a huge toll, and I had no idea it would last as long. I had no idea the wreckage that would come from it, from just emotionally dealing with hospice care and being a hospice care provider, which it becomes a whole something else. But yeah, knowing the resources, knowing what can happen. A lot of people watched us go through hospice care for 14 months. And, they've told me, they're like, Chris, we couldn't do that. There's no way that we could provide that, either because they work or it was emotional toll, an incredibly financial toll, and everything else. But there's just so much that you have to look for when you get that you have cancer bomb.
Yeah, there's actually an article that just came out in a veterinary journal looking at Caregiver Syndrome, which is something we usually associate with, a spouse of someone with cancer or something like that, that there's a toll that it takes on you're taking care of a family member that's human with cancer. And this article basically says that happens to our clients when they're taking care of a pet, especially for a long time, especially something that's terminal. It takes its toll on us, and there is a caregiver syndrome for, animal caregivers as well. So it's kind of interesting. I mean, it makes sense, but it's just interesting that someone's actually looked into that and is recognizing that.
Yeah, I've learned about cancer the way that I never want to learn about cancer.
Yeah.
But the nice thing about it, I suppose if you can say if there's a nice thing about it, is I've learned a lot enough that I can now take better care of my current dog. And when I get probably a second dog, because we're used to being a 2-dog family here, probably in a few months, maybe, we'll I'm going to be educated where there's a whole lot of stuff I'm going to be looking out for. And that's, of course, one of the reasons I started the podcast, was because I want people to have those resources. And I also want to learn stuff. Like you've taught me a lot here about pet insurance, getting into it. I never even thought, that was one of my problems with pet insurance. When I looked at it, I was just like, oh my, it was just overwhelming and incapacitating. So I never even thought to go ask my vet, hey, what insurance do you recommend? Because you have to deal with these idiots all day long.
Yeah.
Pay your bills. And, well,
we're the ones who, I often will be an advocate for my clients and call and be like, especially the ones that say per condition, because the dog might have had a skin tumor 2 years ago and now it's got a bone tumor, and they'll just call it all cancer. And I'll call them and say, no, that's not the same. They're not related, but ideally you have a insurance company that is good and kind of works with you. But the veterinarians know, we know, because we know when our clients are having problems with it. But you got to be really, really careful with the insurance, because I guess it's a bit more like the medical system, though. Here in America, they don't always want to cover things, so
yeah,
to be careful. Yeah. But my perfect world, I don't have to talk about money. It's something that I'm a specialist. I work in a beautiful hospital with a lot of care and 24-hour care in all of our wards, and we have an amazing ICU. It's wonderful. It's wonderful care. And some people joke it's better than some people, and in some cases it is, but it's really expensive. It costs a lot of money, and keeping a pet hospitalized for several days is very, very expensive. And people wouldn't want it any other way. They wouldn't want their pets to be alone at night, and we couldn't care for these pets, that way. But the staff costs money, and it's just the reality of veterinary medicine. I wish it wasn't, because it's probably the worst part of my job. So if everyone just came in with insurance and we just had to talk about medicine and what the best plan was for that pet, it would make my days go a lot better.
Yeah. So do you is there anything you see in preventing cancer that pet owners can do as they're raising their dogs, or do anything? Is like exercise, diet, any sort of, nothing is fully 100% preventable, of course, or cure, you can't prevent cancer. You just can't stop it. It's going to probably come the older the dog is. But anything you can recommend, any tips for, if I've got a 2 or 3 year old dog, which I have now, what's some good things I can do to just extend her life as much as possible, if that's possible?
So I think a healthy diet, and kind of working with a veterinarian to have a healthy, balanced diet. The things that have been associated with cancer in pets, there's not that many, to be honest. Some of them are genetic, so you can drive yourself crazy. I think you're always going to have Huskies, because I think that is the breed that you love, and I have breeds that I love. But there's certain breeds that are predisposed, and at least if you choose to have a Scottish Terrier, they're very predisposed to having bladder cancer.
Wow.
If I had a Scottish Terrier, I would probably ultrasound that dog's bladder, once they got to a certain age, regularly, because I would be wondering if they had a problem, and so being educated about your breed, I think, is important. It's not going to prevent anything, but at least you know what to look for. There's an association between obesity and cancer in humans and in pets. So, we talked a bit about diet, but just keeping your pet at a healthy body weight, it's going to help with a lot of things, actually. But potentially there's some links to obesity and cancer. The other one that's been shown is smoking and oral cancer in cats, and some nasal cancers in dogs. Because they're sharing our environment. So if you smoke around your pets, it's kind of like they're smoking. And I hope I didn't just make a whole bunch of people feel really sad. But
but still, that secondhand smoke that makes sense. The environment your animals in and everything else, that makes sense.
For cats, it's that it rests on their fur, and then they groom it, and so they're kind of getting exposed that way. And so there's
holy crap, I never even thought about that. Yeah.
So that's, and also it's probably better for everyone to quit smoking anyway. So it's not just for pets, it's better for them. Those will be, and then certain pesticides have been linked to actually bladder cancer again. So, you know, when you see those signs to stay off the lawn or keep it, I mean, take it seriously. It's probably not a good thing for those pets to be exposed to. Those are really kind of the big things that people can do to prevent it. It's actually one of the questions that probably makes me the most sad when people are sort of going through what you went through, and when they realize their pet has cancer, they say, did I do this? Is it my fault? Did I cause it? And then I'm always like, please don't say you smoke. But other than that, there's really not a lot of things that we do that cause cancer in our pets. And I think the best we can do is kind of watch them closely, you know, have a really good relationship with your veterinarian, make sure that you're staying on top of if there's a lump or a bump, stay on top of it so that you know what it is, and find a veterinarian who's willing to put a needle in it and tell you what it is, even if it's just a fatty lump. You need to know that. If your pet's drinking more, eating less, it starts to be lame when they were not lame before, is really bothered by a limb, that could be cancer. Where it gets really confusing with bone cancer is if you have a pet who's got really bad arthritis, and then they become more lame, and it's tricky to try to figure that out. But if it's, you know, if it's something that you think, no, it's not just the arthritis, there's something else going on, you know, push to try to get that looked at and x-rayed. So, I mean, those are the things we can do, is just be an advocate for our pet, because ultimately we have to be, because they can't talk, so they can't tell us.
That was something they cited, and I should have, I've been aware of, and well, you know, you could beat yourself up what you should have done, but that was the thing that Abby was doing. She was drinking a lot, and I guess the doctor cited it's because the cancer increases the calcium in her blood to kill the liver and kidneys.
Yeah, so that's one of the signs of lymphoma and anal sac cancer and a few other cancers, is that their calcium in their blood goes up, and then they'll start to drink a lot. So, but of course, in hindsight, it's easier to see those things. But I mean, this is why you're here, trying to raise awareness. So any of those kind of changes in eating and drinking, and I think the other thing that is just human nature, we do it for ourselves as well, is you sort of try to talk yourself into a reason why that's happening. But I would say just try to resist that urge and just think, it's a change in my pet's health, and I need to go talk to someone about it, and I need to investigate it. And then the other thing I would say, and you know, you need to be comfortable with your veterinarian, but if you go to a vet with a problem, do something. You know, don't just like do something active, do blood work, do the imaging, or, you know, you're there to get an answer about what's going on. And you can get a lot of information from a physical exam, but really we need to usually do more. We just stick a needle in the mass, or take an x-ray of the chest, or whatever it is, you know, do some blood work. So I would say, you know, be prepared to do something. And if you have insurance, then you don't even have to really think about it, right? You just why not? You know, let's investigate what's going on.
And I really love your approach and your advice on that, because that's what I really advocate for people now too, is get educated, get information. Information is empowering. When they first tell you have cancer, your dog's gonna, you know, you're thinking, oh, it's gonna die, and you know, the world's ending, and it's just this doom of thing that hits you. Getting information was one of the most empowering, educating things I could do, and it gave me a drive to try and see what we could do to extend Abby's life, what we could do to make her more comfortable, and learn about everything that we were in. Do you you know, I read a lot that a lot of people surmise that some dogs have more disease because there was so much inbreeding to create them. I guess there's some truth to that.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is true. So some of the purebred lines, just we know that certain lines are predisposed to certain types of cancer, and that probably is because of line breeding or inbreeding, and we've been trying to breed them for certain characteristics, and so we get that, but we also, unfortunately, at the same time are breeding in other characteristics, and predisposition to cancer is one of them. So some of the breeds, unfortunately, it's usually the really lovely dogs, so golden retrievers, Bernese Mountain Dogs, you know, they have traits that make them like amazing pets, but they are unfortunately predisposed to certain cancers. And our large breed dogs, the giants, usually they're predisposed to bone cancer, and so that is genetic. That's something that's in their breeds. It's really hard as a veterinarian who treats cancer. It's really hard to like terrifying to get a new dog. So I have the muddiest mutt there is.
I see your dog on the picture of the book. Is that a Australian Terrier-ish?
He's from a shelter, but his mom was a healer, and his dad was, I mean, I don't know, take a guess. Everyone likes to take a guess at it. So it'd probably Shepherd, but yeah.
Yeah, I knew a farmer who had that type of dog, and he was out in Moab, Utah, and he had like all this BLM land, and he had cows, and he says, I can tell that dog to go get a cow, and it would take a day or two for the dog to bring. This is how much land that he had cattle on, and he would tell the Australian heeler sheepdog, go get a cow. That thing would come back with a cow. Like, it might take a day or two. Bring it back. He would go get it.
Yeah.
Watching how they take and corral and I forget what the word is we're looking for, but basically how they're just great dogs, and they're loving, and super energy, super just crazy dogs though.
Well, so I'm living in Florida, and I knew the shelter that I wanted to get my dog from. It's a shelter in Ocala. They're really wonderful people there. And so we kept going back, and the shelters in Florida are 80% pit bull or pit bull looking dogs. And just because my family's still in Ontario, they're banned in Ontario, which is probably a whole other podcast. I'm not going to wade into the controversy, but for me, I couldn't have a pit bull or pit bull cross. So I ended up with this heeler cross, but I think I'll always have a heeler cross from now on. I just love them so much. They're wonderful dogs. But that's kind of how I ended up with him.
So let me ask you this, because this is something I've always considered when people have talked about certain breeds have cancer. I've always been partial to huskies. I've just always loved wolves. I have some sort of soul wolf sort of I don't know, something that draws me to them, and so I've always loved huskies. But I never really, I never sat down before I got my huskies and said, what are we looking at for the long term? Do you advise people when they look at, okay, we want to get a dog, we kind of love this dog. Should they really, and I'm at that point now where I'll have to make a choice probably in the next year at getting a second dog, because it's really just too weird not having we've had a two dog family all my life. But you look in the eye and you go, do we really want to enter this gauntlet again where, maybe the first 10 years are awesome, and then, you don't know what's going to happen after that. Should someone really look at, really analyze the breeds they're looking at and look at that? Or should someone just say, after 10 years, all bets are off. You don't know what's going to go. Just try and give your dog the best care you can and swing for the fence, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just dependent on the person of do they really need to know? It'll probably make you happy to know I don't treat a lot of huskies, so
yeah.
they're pretty healthy breed. I think if you have a pet or a breed that you love that's predisposed to certain diseases, I think it's good to know. So one that's popping into my head is Dobermans. People who own Dobermans always own Dobermans because they are wonderful and people get really connected to the breed. There's a lot of heart disease in that breed.
Oh, wow.
Most people who own Dobermans, they know that, but they should know that. They should be educated that they're getting, after a certain age, regular heart checks, and they're kind of prepared for what's going to happen. They'll still go back and they'll lose a dog from heart disease, and they will go back and get another Doberman because that's kind of like you with huskies. That's just what they love. But I think knowing kind of what you're getting into is probably a good idea, and also knowing what diseases to look for and what specialists you should be accessing is probably a good idea. And if it doesn't happen to your dog, it doesn't mean that every golden retriever is going to get cancer, but a lot of them do. And so being kind of prepared, emotionally and financially is probably a good idea. And also, we talked about it before, but knowing who in the family gets to decide medical decisions, not when we're trying to decide about surgery, in the room when it's really everything's so heightened, but when that dog is young and healthy, who in the family is the decider of the medical decisions? Just like having a power of attorney, I guess, or someone who makes medical decisions for a human family member that can't make those decisions. You kind of have to decide that, because then it just takes some of that stress away.
That's pretty amazing. That's good advice. You say that. Do you see that as a fairly good? Do you see it as a fairly often sort of battle that goes on with couples?
Yeah. Because it's emotionally charged. I mean, there's just all the elements of having a conflict, right? I mean, there's high stakes, it's emotionally charged, and people are going to have different opinions. I mean, I could see the same case 5 times in a row, and those families would do 5 different things. Like some would say, this is right for us, or other people would say like, well, we don't have the money, and we're not gonna go into debt for that. Other people will plow themselves happily $20,000 into debt, and they don't have the money, but that's what they're gonna do, and they're gonna find a way to pay for it, and everyone's so different.
It's interesting to say that. So basically, if you're a couple, best thing to do is to sit down and decide if this happens, this person's going to be the decision maker. Hopefully that's, I don't know that if I was in a marriage, I would have survived what I did with my dog. Because it was, the toll that it took for the hospice care and everything else. I was very blessed, but now that you mention it, looking back, one of my biggest problems was a lot of my audience was helping me go through this, and they were going through it too because they loved Abby. They were really big fans of Abby and all the years that we put up photos and shared. She has her own fan page. She has videos on YouTube. And so I had literally hundreds of people sometimes coming at me with, you should put her down now. You're torturing her, you're suffering her, to no, you shouldn't. Here's some more information. Here's some empowerment. One great resource, and I do want to bring this up too, for me was like a day or two after Abby got cancer, and I started searching the internet. I started educating what anal sac cancer was. I started researching survivors, and I started going into, this was very empowering for me. I went into Facebook groups for cancer for dogs, and I also went into like husky groups, and I started posting in there, hey, my dog just got diagnosed with anal sac cancer. Is anybody else gone through this? Can you give me some tips, advice, information? And that was really, really empowering. I had people that were sending me photos of their before and after cancer pictures, which, for me, I used to be one of those people, when I saw blood in a movie theater, I'd have to get up and go to the thing. If it was too much blood, whatever it was, I'd have to go out at the lobby of the theater because I just start wanting to lose it. I almost pass out if you take my blood. I don't know about nowadays. I probably handle it. But going to those Facebook groups was really empowering because people showed me that their success rates, and they had good stories and bad stories, but they gave me a lot of information that the world wasn't ending tomorrow.
Well, that's great. And another resource I just wanted to mention to you, palliative care has become a whole separate area of veterinary medicine. Mm-hmm. So veterinarians that just do that. They come into your home and they'll assess your pet, and they'll even do home euthanasias when the time comes, but that's not their main focus, actually. So there's a group called Lap of Love that's all over the States now that do this. They're veterinarians that will come and do home care and palliative care, but on their website they have called a quality of life score. And there's other quality of life scores, so it's not the only one. It's just the one that I know how to find the best, and I found it really useful for my clients. And it will kind of objectify the subjective data of how's my dog doing today, how's their quality of life, and it looks at, did they eat, are they interacting with me, did they want to go for their walk, how's their bowel movements, kind of all those things that you can look at in the day of a dog. How are they sleeping, are they comfortable, do I think they're painful? But you have to give it a score, basically. And then you can add those points together and you can kind of know what your dog's score is. And for people that are kind of embarking on palliative care or hospice care, I recommend they do that score every week. Because you'll honestly see it drop. And then it's sort of, oh, okay, things aren't going as well. Or, and you can look back at your scores and say, well, she used to be here. And now, like 4 weeks down the road, I'm actually only putting her here for her score. And just kind of will help instead of having 100 people telling you what to do, which I'm sure they all meant the best for you and for Abby.
They did.
Kind of have like an objective way to say, actually, I'm not scoring the same as what I used to be. And I think if you're going to do hospice care with your pet, you kind of need that. You kind of need someone checking in on you that is objective. So your family veterinarian coming to home visits or going to see them, so that because also you see the dog every single day, and so you honestly miss things. You miss subtle things like weight loss. Whereas if you are weighing the dog every month, that's a very objective thing. You can say, okay, this is where we're at with weight, and that's an important measure. Appetite and weight for animals. It's it's a big thing as far as how they're feeling and their quality of life. So that's another tool that people can kind of have in their toolbox to just kind of help them with their decision making. It's definitely not easy to make these decisions. So.
That's awesome, man. I wish I had known about that site 16 months ago. Wow, because that was one of the big arguments that was going on socially with Abby. Is her quality of life? Were we taking her too far? Where some people thought, and at one point we went through a thing with Abby, and this was again something I didn't understand. I think it was about 7 or 8 months into her thing, we started to get a lot of crouching and a lot of what turned out to be arthritis. And the arthritis medicine we were giving her just said stop working, wasn't really working anymore. And because she was crouching, I thought it was the anal cancer pain from the tumor. And we actually said, okay, we're going to go put Abby down. She's in too much pain. I can't seem to get her out of it. This is done. And that was really one of the factors we looked at was, can we get Abby out of pain? Can we stay ahead of the pain in hospice care and not be chasing the pain with pills after she's in pain? And we actually went in to put Abby down because I said, I can't, we're giving her a lot of tramadol. I can't deal with this crouching thing. It looks like she's in pain. She looks like she's hurting. And we actually went in and paid the money, signed the papers to put Abby down. The veterinarian came in, and thank God he said, can we insist on looking at Abby first? And I said, okay, but, go ahead. And they came back and they said, is Abby eating? Is she, doing all the stuff? And she was. And they go, what she's experiencing is not from the anal cancer. It's actually her arthritis medicine isn't really working anymore. And what we like you to do is switch to a different arthritis medicine. And we really think that you don't need to put Abby down. I mean, they really said, Abby's not done. If you're done, we'll put her down. But we don't think Abby's done yet because we think that this is really, and here I was thinking it was the cancer. So the great thing is, yeah, that worked. We put her on a different arthritis medication, and she came right back, and the quality of life went up. But yeah, having that quality of life, I'm going to Google that when we get done with this webcast and share that with my thing. One of the other topics we bring up, and I don't know how much, I don't want to extend too much time. I'm sure you got to do other stuff, but having so many people come at you is really sometimes overwhelming, and being able to have good advocates. Because I had people telling me that I was being an abusive person by extending her life and she would never be the same, so you should quit now. Well, I had other people telling me to extend her life, and trying to mull through all of that stuff was just overwhelming.
Yeah, it's pretty awful. I think most of my clients aren't on social media like you are, and so wouldn't have that experience of like so much, which can be overwhelming, but still they go to work, and depending on how many animal people you work with, there'll be people who don't understand that you have had to take time off because your dog had to have surgery, or they don't understand why you're doing that. And people can be really insensitive, I think, about making comments like, why would you do surgery? Why don't you just get a new dog? I just find that amazing that that would actually come out of someone's mouth. Like, I'm like, wow, like you don't even know what that dog means to that person. Like, you wouldn't say that about someone's child. And I'm not equating that children and dogs are the same, but for some people they do fill that a similar role. And so I just think this is so amazingly insensitive that someone would say that. And I never have understood that. Someone will say, oh, I just got a new TV. And no one would say, oh, well, how much did that cost? And that was stupid. And why did you do that? But like, you'll say that you spent money on your dog having surgery, or maybe just say, my dog had surgery, and people will just feel compelled to give their opinion, and like a lot of opinions. And I don't know the best way to deal with that, to be honest. I mean, I think you do have to try to like just block it out and listen to your advocates. People who know medical information are very good friends to have. Like, if you're going through something. For me, when I had thyroid cancer, I was so lucky that I knew what I knew. I mean, honestly, because I was told by 4 doctors that I didn't have cancer, and sort of told like, go away. We're gonna. Wow. And it was really just because I knew that I was like, no, this is a problem, and I need to do something about it. So, advocacy for your own health, advocacy for your pet's health, it's extremely important. But listening to all that, it's just noise, you know, and it's not, it's most of the time it's really unhelpful, and it just makes you feel bad because maybe some other people wouldn't have done hospice care with your dog, but it sounds like you wanted to, you know, she obviously was a huge important part of your life, and you did it. And it sounds like it overall went well, you know, for her, and you were always on top of things with her. So how can anyone criticize that? You know?
Yeah, you're right. It's interesting, and sometimes you have close family too. And I think your advice that you've given is really great. Designate somebody in a relationship to be the decision maker, and that way it's kind of pre-done, because I can see how couples would fight over that stuff. And I've even had close family that they just don't get. They just really disconnected from the dog connection. And even some of the people that would have arguments with us on social media would be like, well, your dog's in pain, so you should put it down. Well, if I use that sort of basis in life, that if a mammal is in pain, you probably should have killed me like 10 years ago. I lived with all sorts of pain. My mom lived with knee pain for like 10 years before she finally had knee surgery. And it got really awful for her before she finally got it done. But I never was going, oh, Mom, you have a knee pain? Oh, we should put you down now. You know, you never take that as towards a human being. And we actually go to extraordinary lengths to keep human beings alive. So the dismissiveness of that was something I had to deal with, and being very public, but having the Facebook groups and talking to husky owners, people who had anal cyst cancer, what their journey was, that really helped give me a lot of information and realize the bigger picture outside of that initial darkness of like, my dog's, it's over, it's, you know, we've hit the wall.
Yeah, I think the benefits of some of those groups is it does it insulates you, because those are just the husky people, or those are just the dog people. Those are the people that chose to treat their dog's cancer. So you should put your dog down people are probably not getting down those groups as much. And I mean, it's just really hard. Like there's animal people and not animal people, and they're just not the same people. They don't see things the same way. I mean, it's hard to convince people otherwise. I think that decision of how much treatment is too much is really personal. And I think as long as you're working closely with a veterinarian who's kind of keeping an eye on things for you so that you don't let it go too far, because I mean, I think that can be hard, that you kind of lose that objectivity. You know, I think it's fine, but that's where having, you know, close relationship with your family veterinarian, having a hospice care veterinarian who could come and visit you to make sure that things are going okay and that pain is being controlled. Of course, that's important, but it sounds like you know that, you know, and you were taking care of that. So, you know,
I pretty much had to become a nurse.
It sounds like
I became Nurse Chris Voss, and I didn't mind it at all. But the things I had to deal with and discover, and like I say, I can handle blood now, and it used to be any little thing about my dog that, you know, we found that was imperfect, I'd freak out and flip the lid about. And you know, working with the veterinarians, you know, veterinarians like, this is how it goes. This is normal. Calm down. You know, at the time, this is you know, she used to get a lot of tabs and different like little cysts on her skin, and normally we just cut them off and they're fine. But you know, when I find one, I'd flip out. But being empowered just really made a difference with information, and that's why I'm hoping people will listen to these podcasts, even if their dogs aren't sick, so they can kind of get, you know, a heads up on their pet health, their knowing information so they can get ahead of it, and then knowing what to do when it happens, because it will happen given the age of the dog. Yeah,
well, I think I really appreciate you letting me be a part of it, and I think it's a great way to honor Abby.
Yeah. So it helps her live on as we think of it. Absolutely. And if Abby can save some more lives, and I think we've kind of done that through some of the advocation that we've done and information we share with people. I've actually had a few different friends that they were given the same 3-day your dog's dead sort of thing, and now it's 6 or 9 months later, and their dogs have actually improved. And but I love the fact that I really wish I would have known about a website for quality of life, because that was always the argument that I was having with people around me is does she really have a good quality of life? Is she really enjoying being here, or is she not? And having having a scoring factor with a logical sort of Ben Franklin thing really would have helped.
Yeah,
so,
it actually my parents. So they were going through a very similar thing. Their dog had anal sac cancer and trying to decide when. So even for my own parents, who have a veterinarian in the family, they needed that. They needed that tool. So
yeah. Well, thank you for coming on the show. Everyone check out Dr. Sara Boston's book, Lucky Dog, How Being a Veterinarian Saved My Life. She's got a beautiful dog, of course, on the cover. And evidently it's quite hysterically and thought-provoking journey through the human healthcare service. And probably a good thing for some of the debate that's going on right now with our healthcare systems here. And a lot of people are debating, maybe we should go Canada's way. So I guess I want to read this book to find out the differences between your healthcare system in Canada and ours. And of course, better pet. Maybe I think we should put pets on the Obamacare thing. I don't know. I don't want to get political, but I just thought it was funny.
So many messages now.
We get Obamacare for dogs.
I think it's a good idea. I'll vote for that.
The pre-existing conditions, of course, and I would never want someone to say to me, "Well, your dog had a little cyst they had to cut off," and and that's a pre-existing condition. But I like the fact of talking to your veterinarian about insurance. I never even thought about that. I never even thought about just going to my vet and saying, "Hey, which of these things is the best, and which is the the ones I shouldn't invest in?" So
yeah.
Anyway, thanks for coming, Miss Boston, Dr. Boston, I should call you. And be sure to check out her book on amzn.to. I think you have a website too, and you're on Twitter.
I'm on Twitter. Yeah, I think that's how you found me. So it's really nice. It's nice to meet people through Twitter. I'm really enjoying that.
Yeah, I searched a bunch of YouTube channels and Twitter channels trying to find veterinarians to come on the show and subsequent shows. I hope people really make a difference in the healthcare of their life. I wish I know more, but we're going to moving forward. We're going to make sure we know more as we get new dogs.
Sounds good.
All right.
Really nice meeting you. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks for tuning in, audience, and we'll see you next time. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. Go to youtube.com/Chris Voss. Hit that bell notification. Subscribe. Also, you'll see us on patreon.com/Chris Voss, and you can subscribe to us on Periscope as well, where we do live shows. And of course, Abby, the Siberian Husky, you can see her fan page on Facebook. We keep updating. I have like 10 trillion photos of her, and we'll keep publishing photos of the years as we go on in her memorial. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. Thanks for coming by, and we'll see you next time.